Excited to have everyone here today to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, this idea of building your product intuition. Before we do, let me just say a few words about myself. My name is Sachin Rekhi. I'm the founder of a startup called Notejoy. It's a note-taking app for both individuals and teams. So I encourage you to check that out at notejoy.com. But also, I love sharing best practices about product management. I have a blog at sachinrekhi.com. We've written over 175 essays. I've done a bunch of YouTube videos. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter to find out more of my product management content. So let's jump right in to talk about today's topic of building your product intuition. So what's interesting is someone who I actually think has written some of the best stuff on this topic is actually Jeff Bezos. So I wanted to start with kind of a couple of insights from Bezos himself. So Amazon is famous for having these 14 leadership principles. It's sort of these guideposts of what they look for in great leaders within the organization. And I wanted to read Amazon's leadership principle number 4. The principle is that leaders are right a lot. They have strong judgment and good instincts. They seek diverse perspectives and work to disconfirm their beliefs. Now, the reason I think this is so important is that sometimes when we get sort of into the craft of product management, we spend a lot of our time thinking about how do we improve our processes? What are the best practices to doing everything from coming up with a product strategy to prioritizing a roadmap? And we might get sort of lost in sort of this process effort to improve our processes. But what Jeff is reminding us is that's not enough. It's not simply enough to follow a process to a T to drive some product outcome. We ultimately need to make bets, and those bets have to be the right bets that ultimately drive those product outcomes. Why is this so important? You know, it turns out even today, most new product innovation fails. Many A/B tests that we launch fail. And to up the odds, it's not like they weren't following a process, but actually what you need is good instincts and strong judgment to make those calls up front that are likely to lead to better product outcomes. And that's this very idea of product intuition, that we need this intuition to give us that strong judgment and to have good instincts. Now, Bezos actually goes on to distill why exactly is this so hard. So what I love about Bezos is he offers some of the best business writing on the internet through his shareholder letters. So I'm going to read you a little bit from one of his shareholder letters from 2016 that gets at this point of product intuition. But if you haven't read Bezos's letters, I'd encourage you to read them. I've read every single one of them. Some of the most fascinating lessons on kind of business and product that you can find out there. Well, let me dive in here. He talks about market research and customer surveys can become proxies for customers, something that's especially dangerous when you're inventing and designing products. 55% of beta testers report being satisfied with a feature. That's up from 47%. Now, that's really hard to interpret. What does that even mean, that satisfaction is up from 47 to 55%? He says, good inventors and designers deeply understand their customer. They spend tremendous energy developing that intuition. They study and understand many anecdotes rather than only the averages you find on surveys. They live with the design. I'm not against beta testing and surveys, but you, the products and service owner, must understand the customer, have a vision, and love the offering. Then beta testing and research can help you find your blind spots. And I love this last sentence here. A remarkable customer experience starts with heart, intuition, curiosity, play, guts, and taste. You won't find any of it on a survey. And so the idea here is that Bezos is trying to remind us that we need to really deeply understand our customer to intuitively build better product experiences. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be running surveys. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be A/B testing. But this idea of product intuition is so important despite all those processes that we're running as product managers. Now, I want to start by kind of detailing what does this product intuition thing even mean? So there's a bunch of definitions out there, but here's the one that I love, and we'll get to why I love this one. It's The idea of product intuition is that it's our ability to accurately predict a product outcome in the absence of data. And that last part is important here, in the absence of data. Sure, we're always running A/B tests. Sure, we're launching features and looking at the metrics. But the reality is we need to be making a lot of day-to-day decisions every day without that data. Maybe you're working with your designer and he's showing you a bunch of different designs and you got to pick. You can't A/B test all of them. You got to pick amongst them. So you're going to leverage your product intuition to help decide, based on everything I know, I think this design is going to resonate better with the customer than these other variants. That's you leveraging your intuition to predict what that product outcome is. Or maybe it's a situation like you're trying to decide, do you have to go after target audience A or target audience B? And sure, you went and talked to a lot of people, you got a lot of data, but of course you heard some conflicting things. And ultimately, you have to make that call. Which one of these is in fact better as a customer segment to go after? And again, you're going to let that product intuition to predict what's likely to be the more successful product outcome. And so that's what this idea of having strong product intuition is all about. Now, what I also love is this great quote from David Lieb. For those of you who might not know David Lieb, he's the founder of Google Photos. He actually started a company called Bump that was acquired by Google. And then ultimately, he incubated this whole Google Photos, one of my favorite products from Google right now, especially with a child. It's one of the things I spent a lot of time using. But he had this great quote when he was talking about this idea of product intuition. He says, your gut is the most sophisticated machine learning model ever built. I love that quote. When he's talking about gut here, let's be clear, he's talking about product intuition. And so he was saying this in a recent interview he did with 20VC with Harry Stebbings. And this idea that product intuition is really like a machine learning algorithm kind of gets at why I love that definition of product intuition. It's the ability to predict, right? That's what we do with machine learning algorithms. They predict the future. They predict something based on a bunch of data. Now, what I found useful about this definition is it helps us get at how do we improve our product intuition. Now, here's the thing about product intuition. A lot of people will say it requires experience. You get it with experience. And this is true. Of course, you get it with experience. The more experience you have, the more experiences you've seen, and therefore you've built your product intuition better, right? But I'm here to tell you that we can all accelerate the development of our own prediction engine, of our own product intuition. And this is why I love this sort of definition and thinking of it as a machine learning model, because I think we can then use the lens of how do we train our product intuition? How do we train this machine learning algorithm? And we can use some of the best practices that come from this very idea of building great machine learning predictive models. So the first thing it requires is lots and lots of data to deepen our customer understanding. What we're trying to do is figure out how do we deeply understand the customer to the point where we can intuit what they want, intuit what they need. And that's what that product intuition is all about. But we need to understand that customer deeply. We need to be immersed in lots of data about those customers. It's what Bezos was talking about, understanding many anecdotes about our customers. And so I'm going to talk about a tool that I use to do that specifically. And it's not about people in general. It's about the people that are using our product. That's what it has to be very specific for us to really understand that customer segment. Now, the second thing you need is labeled data on successful product outcomes. Right? We all know when we're training machine learning algorithms, we do it through labeling a bunch of data, inputs and outputs, and then training regression models on this stuff, right? And so the idea here is every time we test something, let's say we launch an A/B test with variant A and variant B, and we realize variant A won. That is an insight. And that's a labeled product outcome in the sense that helped us to next time realize, it turns out in this case, this variant worked better than that variant. Or you launch product initiatives. Some work, some succeed, some fail. Those are opportunities to build your labeled success product outcomes, which then help you intuit what's likely to work in the future. And so we'll again talk about some techniques there to accelerate that very effort. So let's go deep on the first one. Lots and lots of data to deepen our customer understanding. Hey, this is the very point of customer research, right? We all do customer research as product managers to deepen our understanding of our customer. But I want to talk about what's challenging with the traditional methods of customer research that we do when we're specifically trying to accelerate uh, building our product intuition. Now, the two things we typically do is customer research and metric dashboards, right? So we're constantly looking at dashboards to understand customer behavior. We look at acquisition, engagement, monetization dashboards to basically help us understand what are people doing in our product, how are people finding our product, what features they're using, what features they're not using, all useful to help us understand what, but not why. And it turns out the why is incredibly important to build your product intuition. Simply knowing something is working or not doesn't really help. We need to get at the motivation, the reasoning, the challenges, the problems, that why. Now, of course, that why is why we do research studies. We're all doing customer interviews, we're running surveys. Hopefully, we're even doing things like field studies where we go out to our customer and hang out with them in their own environment to really understand what a day in the life looks like those customers. All very helpful. But let's be honest, they're pretty infrequent and they get out of date. I remember at LinkedIn, when I was running the LinkedIn Sales Navigator business, I had a pretty well staffed research team. But really, we did like once a quarter of deep research at best, right? And again, that's useful to help shape the product, but it's not enough to accelerate building our own product intuition. We're not hearing from the customer enough in these traditional tools. And that's why I really felt like we had to do more. And ultimately, I discovered this tool, which I call a feedback river, as a way that we can actually get those many anecdotes, that voice of the customer on a continuous real-time basis to help build our product intuition. And so let's talk about this tool, the feedback river, because I think it's important as we're thinking about accelerating our own product intuition. So what is it? It's an open channel for any team member to get continuous real-time voice of the customer across a multitude of sources. So it's a bit of a mouthful. So let me break it down. So the first thing we're talking about is getting continuous feedback, not these quarterly research studies or even these monthly surveys that we're doing, continuous. I mean, every day. I mean, multiple times a day, you're hearing directly from the customer. And you're hearing it as voice of the customer, directly in the words of the customer, their frustrations, their excitements, their things they love about the product, things they hate about your product. And that's really important. And finally, you're getting it from a variety of sources, not just one source, but multiple sources, allowing you to triangulate across those sources. So I'm going to show you what this looks like, but let's talk first about, let's say you have one of these. What's the point? What's the benefit of this? Well, it turns out it enables us to get voice of customer directly from the source. Now, the reason this is important is that oftentimes, for example, we might have a customer research team talking to customers. We might have a marketing team talking to customers. They go and talk to customers. They bring back their summaries of feedback, right? Now, it turns out those summaries might be useful to help you prioritize a roadmap, but they're not useful for helping you to build your own product intuition. Simply hearing, hey, people are requesting feature X, Y, and Z in this priority order doesn't get at why. It doesn't get at what are their problems, what are their frustrations, what are their habits, what are their inclinations, what are their motivations. That's what we need to know to build our product instincts and build our product intuition. And so this feedback river gets you that direct voice of the customer, unfiltered by these intermediaries that sort of water down the ultimate learning for us. Now, the other thing is it gives us the ability to recognize patterns across sources. And so we're now looking at multiple sources. And you'll see this in a second, all the different sources we pull in. But that pattern recognition of like, here's an anecdote I heard. Oh, man, I'm hearing it from this other source. Maybe I should pay attention to this. Maybe there's something here that's important for us to more deeply understand in. And so maybe you'll dive in there. The other key benefit you get here is real-time feedback after product updates. Oftentimes we launch stuff and we don't hear, do people like it? Do they not like it? The ability to get more real-time continuous feedback helps us better train that machine learning model, that product intuition, more continuously because we're getting that feedback on a regular basis. All right, so let me show you what this looks like at my own company at Notejoy. I've built this now several times at LinkedIn with LinkedIn Sales Navigator, but also at Notejoy, my current startup. So it's pretty simple. we created a channel in Slack called feedback. And then we programmatically pushed many different sources of customer feedback, customer voice of customer, directly into this channel. Now, anyone can join this channel and see voice of customer in basically real time all day long about what customers are saying about our product. So let me talk about now how we built this up, from the very first source we added to all the additional sources we added over time. These days, we have about a dozen different sources feeding into it, but I want to make it clear you can start today in 20 minutes. So if you don't have this right now, here's how to get started in 20 minutes. So the first source we started with is Net Promoter Score. I'm a huge fan of Net Promoter Score. Frankly, not for the score, not for the 0 to 10, but for the verbatims that people give you on why they gave you that score. And so what we do in Notejoy is every user, after they've been using the product for about 14 days, they get a survey that pops up in the product that says, how lucky are you to recommend this product to a friend or colleague on a scale of 0 to 10. And then after that, they get an open text box that says, tell us a little bit more why you gave us that score. And so we can see here, for example, someone gave us a 10, and they told us, I love the integration with Trello. Notejoy integrates deeply with another project management tool called Trello, and that's the part they love. And so what's great about this is I'm learning what exactly of the promoters, the people that give us high scores, what exactly is it that they love about the product? That's useful to keep reminding myself this is the magic of our product that we need to double and triple down on. Now, of course, we have a lot of detractors that gives us 0 to 5 scores. And from them, I'm learning what frustrates them about the product. What do they hate about the product? What is making them not be a promoter? And those verbatims are gold. Now, what's great about this is that because we do this for every new user after their 14th day, we're continuously getting these. Every single day I open my feedback river, I'm seeing tons of NPS survey results in real time. And so that's super valuable. Now, let's show you how easy it is to actually put this in the product. All we did was create a feedback channel in Slack, and then we used a tool called WooTrick, which actually does Net Promoter Score for you. WooTrick says, hey, drop these few lines of JavaScript in your product, and then we'll take care of popping up the surveys whenever you want us to, actually limiting them so they don't show up too frequently and all that. And so we just popped in some JavaScript, and it took care of the rest. And then we simply installed the WooTrick Slack app. This Slack app does the work of pushing those NPS results in real time into our feedback channel in Slack. That's it. This takes less than 20 minutes, and now you're getting real-time continuous feedback that you can dip into from your customer. Now, let me show you a second source that was equally easy to add. It's also really useful to hear the buzz about your product across social media, right? Like, what are people saying on LinkedIn and Twitter about your product? So what we did was we actually did, anytime anyone mentions Notejoy on Twitter, we push that into our feedback river as an additional source. Again, super simple. Twitter has an app that you can install in Slack, and then you can say, hey, anytime anyone mentions my alias, or they actually mention or include a keyword that relates to my product, make sure that tweet gets pushed into my feedback river in real time. Again, took a couple minutes to set up, but now we're getting voice of customer pushed to us. So these are some of the easy sources that you can put in here. But we got really addicted to this once we started doing this. We realized, wouldn't it be great if from anywhere in the product, we can push programmatically into our feedback river, any source of customer feedback? And so we wanted to do that. So we wrote this little function here. It's a little bit of code, but look, it's like no more than 10 lines of code. And all it does is actually allow us from the code base to push anything into that feedback river. And so then we got creative about new sources of voice of customer that we can burn into the product. So of course, we did the basics, things like feedback submission forms. In Notejoy, there's a button that says send us feedback, gives you a text box, you put whatever feedback you in, that gets sent to the feedback river. So now we can see exactly what people are asking for, feedback they want, or frustrations they're having with the product. Now, of course, this also goes to our customer service team that's responsible for making sure users get replies. So this isn't a replacement for your traditional customer service flows, but this is an additional place where we're pushing that feedback so that the rest of the team can get that benefit of learning from it so it doesn't get locked in the weeds of the customer support team. Now, I want to then get into some of the more interesting sources of feedback that we've ultimately built. So one of them here is canceled account reasons. So the reason I like this one is we make it really easy in Notejoy to cancel your Notejoy account. At any point, you click a link, you press cancel. All we ask you is, can you tell us a little bit about why you're canceling? It's a text box. Sometimes people put junk in it, but a lot of times we get real feedback. Right here, they're saying it's not doing what I thought it'd do in Slack. They had some expectations about our Slack integration, and it wasn't delivering for them. Super useful feedback. The reason I like this one, canceled account reasons, is often we're biasing towards hearing feedback from our most engaged users, right? Our users are excited about our product. They're engaged with our product. They're the ones who take the time and the effort to send us feedback. But what we also want to make sure we're doing is getting feedback from the disengaged users. These users that never adopted in the first place, they canceled usage of their product, right? And so we want to hear from that. This tells us the primary objections for why people end up not adopting your product in the first place. And that's a wealth of voice of customer that helps us to intuit how might we expand the audience that we're serving by actually starting to address the challenges of the people that we're underserving today. And that's an important product intuition to build as we're thinking about growing our products and serving broader and broader audiences with our product. Now, here's another insightful one that I really like, which is help search queries. So this one we added more recently, but the idea here is that anytime someone searches our help center and they're using a keyword to search and that keyword starts to trend as something people are searching frequently for, it then gets bubbled up into our feedback river. Now, why is this helpful? It turns out we all aspire to build intuitive products. If someone has to go to our help center to figure out how to do something, we have failed to build an intuitive product. And so we're going to learn what's not intuitive about our product. What are the things that people need a help article to even figure out how to do in our product? Now, this was actually really helpful for Notejoy in the early days because we kept noticing people kept searching for adding a notebook. And we're like, wait a minute, adding a notebook in Notejoy is supposed to be a core predominant functionality. And it made us realize we had made it sort of buried in the user interface. And so then we redesigned it to make it way more intuitive on how do you add a notebook within Notejoy. And so that's an insight that we weren't getting anywhere else because clearly people are figuring it out. But it gave us a unique lens on how to think about getting feedback from the customer and the challenges they're facing with our products and services. All right. So I want to talk about a couple of additional sources that we ultimately added that ended up being really valuable. So I started doing this at LinkedIn when I was leading the LinkedIn Sales Navigator business. LinkedIn Sales Navigator was sold both online through a self-serve channel, but it was also sold directly through a sales team. We had about 400 salespeople selling the product. And we were always hungry as the product team for feedback from the sales team. What's working, what's not, why are people buying our product, why are people not buying our product? And it turned out it was kind of a messy process. Occasionally, I'd meet with the sales leader. He'd share a few anecdotes that his team was telling him, but I felt like I wasn't getting the full picture. So what we did was institute this very simple process. In Salesforce, which is the tool all the salespeople were using to track their deals, they'd mark a deal as won or lost. All we did was require them to fill in one additional field when they did so. If the deal was won, we'd ask them, what's the primary benefit the customer is excited about with their product? So this way we can learn, hey, we won a deal. Why do they care? What is the value proposition that they're excited about? It's, again, important to keep reminding ourselves of why people love us, why they're excited about us, so we can double down on those experiences in our product. But we did the same thing when a deal was lost. When a deal was lost, we asked our sales reps, can you just put in why the deal was lost? What was the reason? And that ends up being really helpful as well. For example, like with Notejoy, we get this, and people tell us, hey, they would have loved to use this, but they needed SAML. They had a classic enterprise requirement. That's something we don't support in Notejoy. And it gave us a lot of food for thought on whether maybe it's time to start taking on some of these enterprise requirements or not. And so this became an incredible way to drive insight on how is the decision makers in a B2B setting thinking about the product and buying or not buying that product and feeding that into the intuition of the product team. And this is a great contrast to the end user feedback that which we're much more used to getting once they bought the product through things like the NPS surveys and whatnot. And so this became a really important lens for us to get that other half on the decision makers. And so that's why I kind of love kind of this idea. All right. So what's beautiful about this is there's so many easy to add sources to get all of these different sources of feedback into your product. Here, I'm just highlighting a few different products that have easy to use integrations into Slack. Things like Delighted, which is an alternative to Wootrick, which allows you to bring in NPS and other CSAT and other survey results within your feedback river. Things like Gong, which can even bring in your sales calls and sales call summaries directly into your feedback river. So lots of options out there these days to very cheaply build a feedback river without much engineering effort at all. So I want to talk about how I started using this. It became this thing where every morning I'd wake up and I'd both look at my metric dashboards for Notejoy, and then I'd dip into the feedback river. I'd be scrolling through the feedback river to hear, what are my customers saying? Why are they giving us a high NPS? Why are they canceling our product? What are their search queries? And it sort of helped me build my intuition. It got to the point where I do this multiple times a day. I used to open up Twitter when I was sitting in a Slack, sitting in the Starbucks line with a couple of minutes to spare. And then I said, hey, look, I'd rather get the zeitgeist of what my customers are saying. So instead, I'd start opening up my feedback river when I had a couple of minutes to spare, just scrolling through it to get that intuition about what people are loving and hating and struggling with my product. And that became the way I started building that intuition. And this is the important part. All of us have access to these sources today. You probably have an NPS survey that your marketing team is running monthly that you can go log into to go read. You might even have things like, a report that you do on why people are canceling their accounts. But let's be honest, we all don't look at it that often because we have to go there to go get the data. So maybe once a quarter you look at it, maybe once a month. It's tough to build your product intuition that way. The goal here is to have all of that information pushed to us and make it so lightweight to engage with it that we can easily spend 15, 20 minutes a day really hearing our customers. And that's what builds that intuition. Now, I want to give a word of caution here because I've had some folks actually go build this and then they're like, great, I built a feedback river. I started getting a bunch of feature requests, and then I had my team prioritize those feature requests. Is that good? No. It turns out the goal here is a little bit more nuanced. It's not just to collect feature requests and implement them. We're trying to go deeper. And I love this quote from Henry Ford, at least attributed to Henry Ford. Some people dispute this. But he said, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have asked for faster horses. And his point is, here's Henry Ford who wants to invent a better way. He's inventing a car. None of his customers were asking for a car because they can't be asked to innovate. That's our job as innovators, right? And so you can't simply ask them and implement exactly what they want, but you can learn about their problems, right? In this way, he's saying, at least I knew they found traveling by horse to be too slow. So he knew the problem that's worth solving with horse travel is speed and getting to the destination faster. And that was one of his requirements for the car. And we should be thinking the same way when we hear voice of customer from a customer. When they give us a feature request, let's find out what's their motivation. What's the problem they're trying to solve? Why do they feel like they need that feature in the first place? And then we, as product designers, can invent a better way. When we deeply understand the challenges they're facing, it may look like the feature request they've asked for, or it might not. It might look like we have a better solution to that in the first place. And so that's where I think it's really important for us to be thoughtful about how we use the voice of customer to really build a better way. All right. So we talked a lot about how do we get lots and lots of data to deepen our customer understanding. I want to spend a few minutes now talking about the second piece, this idea of labeled data on successful product outcomes. This idea that we do product initiatives, we see what works and what doesn't work, and we learn. And that learning is what builds our product intuition. So the person I like to think about how to do this in an accelerated and structured way is Annie Duke. So Annie Duke wrote this great book called Thinking in Bets. And what she does is she talks about, we all think we're really rational decision makers, but the reality is we all suffer from tons of biases, cognitive biases, everything from confirmation bias to motivated reasoning. All of these are different forms of biases that prevent us from making rational choices and rational decisions. And so she attempts to guide us on how do we make sure we're being thoughtful about how do we do this properly. And so she has this very simple learning loop. It's going to seem bone dead simple, but I'm going to even get into why this is actually hard. So she says the right way to think about product decision making is you start with a belief, some belief of what you think might improve your product. And then you come up with a bet, which is how can we test whether that belief is true? And then we get the outcome of that test, right? And then if we're good about it, we then leverage that to update our intuition, right? Did that test work or not? Based on that, we should update our intuition about our customers, what works when we're trying to drive behavior for our customers and whatnot. So let me give you a very simple example of this. So let's say we have a belief. After building our product's doing okay, but I think we'd be better off targeting customer segment B because I think the pain point is stronger for this other customer segment. Now, okay, let's come up with a bet. The bet might be, let's run a marketing campaign to attract a cohort of this new customer segment to our product. So it's a lightweight test. We're going to go get that customer segment, bring them into our product, and now we're going to measure the outcome to see if they actually, in fact, are engaging with our product in a better way. But let's say in this case, it didn't work. We saw no increase in conversion rate, engagement, or retention compared to our normal customer segments. So it turns out we were wrong, that wasn't a better segment. Now it's time to update our intuition. We need to be thoughtful about, okay, let's update our understanding. It turns out customer segment B is, in fact, not a better customer segment than customer segment A. So this sounds so simple, but let me tell you what goes wrong. The reality is oftentimes we are not truth-seeking. We're not, in fact, doing this to learn the right lessons. Maybe we did some initiative and we're trying to prove to our boss that, hey, we did a good job and hey, it was worth it, right? That's not truth-seeking. And it might prevent us from building the right product intuition. You might also have situations where you end up with these kind of interesting dynamics where, you have motivated reasoning and you think, it kind of worked, but it didn't really. And so this is where it's useful when you do these postmortems to bring together a group of people so that you're actually working together to come up with what is the real lesson to be learned from the situation. And when we do this for every single time we launch a product, that's how we build our product intuition. Now, the challenge is sometimes we're just so fast launching things, we forget to really ask ourselves in postmortem what worked and what didn't work. And that can be challenging as we think about learning and building our product intuition. So it's really important to do that. All right, I can see I'm getting a lot of glare here, so I'm going to close my blinds for a second. All right, so that's this idea of building product intuition and how you can use these various tools from feedback rivers to this decision loop to really improve your product intuition. So we're going to open it up for questions in a minute here. But before we do, I want to tell you a little bit about, if you found this content useful, how you can kind of go deeper. So this idea of product intuition and feedback rivers is actually a module in one of the courses I offer with Reforge. That course is called Mastering Product Management. And so the idea behind this course is that it's targeted at PMs, senior PMs, principal PMs who are looking to increase the impact of their work. The proverbial go from good to great in their product efforts. And what we do is we take each of the 8 deliverables that product managers are responsible for. Everything from product specs to roadmaps to strategy to vision to customer feedback to making decisions, and give you rigorous frameworks for doing each of those better, to do those in a way that you actually can be very thoughtful about how you do them well. So many of us have never been trained sort of formally through kind of product management. And so this gives you that opportunity to get that learning. So we have a cohort starting May 1st. It's a 5-week cohort. These cohorts are designed to be done while you have your day job. So I'd encourage you to check this one out, Mastering Product Management on reforge.com. Chris is going to drop some links here in case you're interested in it. The other course I want to talk about is Finding Product Market Fit. Now, this course is all about new product innovation, which is when we're building a brand new product, the skill set we need is very different than incrementally improving an existing product. I've had the good fortune of being able to do this at both large companies like LinkedIn, where I built the brand new LinkedIn Sales Navigator, to even my own startups like Notejoy and Connected, where I've gone from 0 to 1 in a variety of startup settings. I've now packaged up a lot of those learnings into a modern approach to finding product market fit. We go through everything from defining your product market fit hypotheses to going through validation techniques, which are anything from, running surveys, talking to customers, building prototypes. We even talk about how do you measure product market fit and how do you even bake growth loops into the product. And so if you're working on new product innovation, I really encourage you to check out this course, Finding Product Market Fit. We have a 4-week cohort for this course starting May 29th. So it's coming up soon. And I'd encourage you to check that out. All right. So in our remaining time here, we're going to open it up for questions. I can see we have a bunch of questions already going in the Q&A.
Yeah, so we can start with the most upvoted question from Anir. Anir, if you're still here and would be willing to come off mute and ask your question, that'd be great. Otherwise, I can read it out. Cool. So Anir's question is, what would you recommend as feedback rivers for sales-led / enterprise B2B organizations where access to customers and end users is restricted by org design?
Yeah, totally. So we faced a lot of these challenges with Sales Navigators as well. So there's a couple things. We push the envelope on ways we can get direct feedback from the end user in the ways I showed, right? The NPS survey we put in the product, the help search queries, some of these additional channels that helped us try to get to end users. We also experimented with cases where we can get end users to opt in to providing us additional feedback if it was really prevented from a broad-based way of doing this on the end user side. So that's the end user side. Now, in B2B products, it's incredibly important to get the feedback from decision makers as well. That's where getting the sales feedback is incredibly important. I talked about deals won, deals lost. Now, another thing we did, because the decision makers are so few relative to end users, is we ultimately created a monthly council where we brought together a bunch of decision makers, where my product team could then show them designs, ask them questions, dive into pain points. And that became incredibly valuable since there's a much smaller audience that we were trying to get answers to. And it's really hard to do some of these automated things when you don't have the scale of volume of people to participate. So those are some of the tips there for the B2B side.
Thanks, Sachin. The next question is from Osley. Osley, if you're still here and would be willing to come off mute to ask your question. If not, I'm happy to read it out.
Yeah, sure. I'm here. I mean, it's quite a straightforward question, but is there a way to manage 2 different cuts? I'll just read it out loud. Say a founder has one intuition and a CPO has another.
Yeah, great question. So this happens a lot, that your founder's intuition is different than whoever the head of product might be, or even just different members of the team. Now, I think what's really interesting about this is this gets at how do we actually have a constructive product debate? Because it turns out one or the other or neither of their intuitions could be right, but we're going to have to make product decisions based on this, right? And so part of it I find is really important to get at what are the fundamental assumptions that differ between the 2 parties or the 2 different views. right? So like one has an intuition of this is going to work, another one has an intuition that's going to work, and try to break down what is that fundamental assumption behind it, right? Oftentimes, they're suggesting a specific product decision, but there's some assumption they're making that's causing them to believe that. Once you dig deep to see where your differences are in the fundamental assumption, you can then ask yourself, is there a way to test this? Is there a way to get any sort of data on that fundamental assumption? And maybe they'll agree, hey, look, like I hear you, we have a difference of opinion. I think the difference is that you believe this, and I'm not quite sure about that. Could we get some more data in some way, shape, or form to do that? So that's the way I encourage you to do it, to really piece out what is causing that difference in intuition.
Awesome. Next question is from Anonymous, so I'll read it out. Folks at our company often talk about too much noise in Slack channels. I manage this with custom notification settings based on keywords. I'm wondering how your team avoids drowning in the feedback river.
Great question. So the key thing is that you should treat your feedback river like a social stream, not like an inbox, right? Our point here is to build intuition. So that doesn't mean we have to read every post. It's completely fine not to read every post. We're just trying to dip in, get some insights, and move on with life. And so that's the important mental model here, that you don't need to read everything. Now, there are cases where we've had this happen with Notejoy, where certain channels become very voluminous and they're drowning out all the other sources of feedback. And so at that point, you want to learn to filter effectively, right? Like in the early days, we used to put every help search query in. Now we only put a help search query in if it bubbles up to 10 people have searched for that keyword, right? And so there's ways you can decrease the volume of any given channel to make sure it's not drowning anything out. So those are the tips on how to get the most out of it.
Awesome. Our last question here is from Steven. Steven, are you still here? I can try to read it out if you're not.
I'm here. And Sasha, thanks. I think you sort of alluded to this in an earlier answer, right? I'm asking about when you sort of surface real feedback from users for the rest of your organization and people who maybe have a different intuition about what the organization should be prioritizing, they sort of use that as a galvanizing force, maybe against an existing agreed upon plan. So sort of a second order question, to your point, these are tools you should treat like a social stream. Like there's a lot of navigation, like there's a lot of organizational navigation you have to do beyond this. And so I'm just kind of curious if you have any advice for like when this feedback is being galvanized against sort of agreed upon product priority.
Yeah, no, this is a really important point. I do talk about in the course this idea of recency bias, right? One of the things you can bias yourself towards is recency bias, or loudest voice bias, right? Like I've had cases at LinkedIn where my sales lead was like, hey, look, Sachin, we really got to implement this feature. We're about to lose this $1 million deal if we don't implement this one feature. And I'm like, okay, I hear you, why this customer is very upset, but here's all the other stuff we've agreed upon that is likely going to impact more than just one deal, right? And so it's important to avoid that. In the course, we talk about another tool called a feedback management, feedback system of record, which what that's trying to do is be the CRM of feedback to give you some sort of consensus of what is the most requested stuff. What are the biggest pain points? And so we use these in concert. The feedback river is all about building our intuition, but the feedback system of record, the CRM of feedback, which is saying, hey, look, 50 people want this thing or have this pain point versus 20 people have this thing, that helps us build a little bit stronger intuition to avoid that recency bias. And so I encourage people to have both tools as a way to, improve their intuition, but also to be strategic about making product roadmap decisions.
Awesome. We're right at time. So thank you so much, everyone from all around the world, for joining us this morning, this afternoon. We'll be following up with the recording within 72 hours of the talk, and you'll be met with a brief survey when you exit this presentation. Give us feedback. We're going to keep doing these events and would love to continue to make them better. Sachin, any last words before we sign off?
No, good luck building your product intuition.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.